Hello, welcome to Nashville Savvy. I'm your host, Megan Leipert-Seidlich, and today we're going to go through a couple of your favorite local politics here in Nashville, Tennessee. If you're new to the podcast, just so you know, we do have a free subscription to our daily newsletter at pamphleteer.co. And if you've been sticking around with me for this long, thank you for joining me again. And let's get right into this week. So I'm going to do a little bit of a recap first with stuff that happened last week, especially about the East Bank and a little bit more about the Nest zoning laws. So starting with the East Bank, there is an authority bill that is coming up for another committee meeting tomorrow. Am I back? I'm looking. This happened twice in a row. There's a conspiracy here now. So let's talk about the East Bank Authority bill coming up tomorrow. So this is like snuck through the state legislature. It was introduced about a month ago, and it's dense. It's legalese. It's hard to read. Essentially, it's meant to create an authority that would oversee all of this development happening over on the East Bank. Of course, we already made this deal. It's a done deal. We have the, Titan Stadium, the new deal, the East Bank development deal that was passed in Metro. This is a $2.1 billion endeavor. And now they're trying to create an authority to kind of professionalize the oversight. So instead of having the council arguing back and forth about passing things that need to be passed so that they could go forward with developing the East Bank. They're trying to create this separate authority that would have basically the run of the mill. And we've seen the council struggle with the state over these authorities, especially when the state has appointed people into the authorities. This authority would not have any voting members that are appointed by the state, even though the state did put $500 million into this deal. It would actually have 7 voting members that are appointed by the mayor and the council, and then it would have 3 non-voting members that are appointed by, well, they're not really appointed. The positions are people who exist in the state. So the comptroller, the secretary of state. So this has caused a little bit of controversy only because what happens with the enforcement compliance and eminent domain of this East Bank Authority. They basically, from I-24 to I-65, all the parcels within that landscape on the riverfront are now within this East Bank Authority. They have this potential eminent domain. They have the ability to enforce compliance. And as we talked about during the East Bank deal, these things include leasing agreements that include affordable housing, DEI requirements, including different storefronts that can be open that have to be, 30% minority owned, potentially different workers having to be a certain amount of DEI hiring. All these things could potentially come within the purview of this East Bank that's now controlled by the East Bank Authority. It also is allowed to own, I'm going to read this, own, acquire, purchase, option, convey, exchange, donate, sell, gift, rent, lease, improve, maintain, operate, and equip real and personal property, all without the need for separate approval from the metro government or any other agency. So this really is creating like a bureaucratic, controlling authority that will have control over this area, including potentially, buying up some of the private parcels that already exist. We're talking this is going all the way, past where Topgolf is down here, where the new Oracle build is going to be. So people are a little bit weary about the languages in this, and it's kind of not gotten a lot of robust discussion on the floor. Though last 2 weeks, we've had these bills getting hot potatoed around at the state legislature. It ends up in one committee, and then that committee sends it back to the other committee, and now everything is sent back to different committees in both the House and the Senate that will be hearing from one of them this week, and then potentially another one this week, where maybe we'll hear a little bit more about the discussion. They're concerned about the fiscal implications of this bill, because the authority does have the ability to now create bonds. We thought that we already paid, we paid for this deal. No. This deal is going to keep accruing more and more debt for the city as they continue to build it out. I have somebody gave me a tip that there's already $60 million that Metro doesn't know how they spent. So yes, we made a deal. Yes, it had a price tag, but of course, now that they're going to develop it, that price tag, I guess, is subject to change. Beyond those things, we're looking at people coming forward, conservatives in the area coming forward with some concerns about not only who's appointed and who has voting power on the board, but this eminent domain. And then eventually, if it does get kicked to the council to vote on, because if the state approves it, then the council has to approve it with a 2/3 majority vote. The council will have to decide. There's a CEO of the board who will be appointed the first time by the mayor, and I think after that it's appointed by the council. It's a paid salary position. No idea how much they're going to get paid. There is a term limit, it seems, in the language that it's a 2-term limit, because the CEO has to be an appointed board member that is then given that position, and they have limits of 2 4-year terms is the limit. According to how I've read the documentation, I could be wrong. The legalese is difficult to decipher, which also makes me like people a little bit sketched out about this bill. We have no idea how much that CEO is going to make every year. We don't know how much the board's getting compensated. They can get potentially compensated for their time in certain ways. So that's going to be a fiscal note that Metro is going to have to cover, which means Metro taxpayers are going to have to cover. We have no idea. So that's kind of the update of that. Pay attention to how the committee meeting goes this week in the Senate, and I'll be reporting on it in the pamphleteer. The next thing up is Nest. So moving down the line, Nest is, of course, this packet of zoning bills that were presented in January. They were Am I here? They were pushed initially by Quinn Evans Siegel, a council member who's a new at-large council member. It was disruptive. If you have been following along with Nest, or if you haven't, please, you can refer back to some of our articles. But I'm not going to give you guys a rundown because we've talked about it so many times. But the real question here is community input over? We had all these people come out to one of the community input meetings that Quinn Evans Siegel put on a couple weeks ago. People were not happy. They did not understand why all of a sudden they would impose new density zoning laws that would basically come in and rework the entire infrastructure of neighborhoods and areas. They don't necessarily want this sweeping zoning legislation because it could ruin the character of these neighborhoods that have been established over the years. It's a sweeping zoning law. It's a sweeping zoning bill. And there's quite a few of these sweeping zoning bills, more that have impact in ways that people are upset about more than others. So last week, the council passed a resolution that would basically have almost all the departments that would be impacted by these zoning changes and density changes to do a study and assess how would these changes be helpful or harmful to some of the ways that our departments operate within Metro government. What kind of things do we have to look at and be weary of? What kind of things do we have to change to some of these bills? They passed a resolution where they're going to do this study in all the Metro departments to look at these zoning bills They have until March of 2025. So they have until next year. That being said, only 2 of the Nest bills were withdrawn from the actual calendar. So the 2 that were withdrawn that are now going to be pending these studies both had to do with, let me look this up real quick because I always forget. They would allow 3 and 4 unit residential complexes in urban service districts and then duplexes in general service districts. So those bills were both withdrawn and they are pending this year-long study. But Berkeley Allen, one of the bill sponsors, the resolution sponsors, and one of the bill sponsors for the Nest bills, she made it known during the council meeting that this doesn't necessarily mean that this is a interaction. This isn't like a study that's going to be with community input. This is just a study based on how these different departments are affected by these zoning laws. So we're not talking about community input anymore. I will say that they are leaning on 2 things. One, that Metro Nashville already passed the Nashville Next initiative quite a few years ago. And in that, it specifically outlined that, we wanted to have these zoning improvements done. And they passed it after lots of community input. And basically, it ticked off everybody. But that usually means compromise. Like everybody had something that they liked in it. Everybody had something that they didn't like in it. And now they're just implementing the types of bills that would fulfill that initiative. So the first thing is that they're like, we already had all the community input in Nashville Next. So we don't really need that same community input anymore. The second thing is that now it's really up to your council members and your, whoever is willing to kind of hold meetings. It's really up to them to hold these community meetings from now on. So it's not something that we're necessarily going to see. They're not collecting information and data from you, but they're willing to hear you air out your grievances, maybe bring those to the table when they're discussing the bills when they come back on first reading in a year. That being said, we've played this game so many times, and it's the lip service game of like, oh, we'll hear you out, but they're going to do what they want to anyway. So I would suggest letting your council members know what your hard lines are on this and that you're still going to pay attention, even if they push some of this legislation off, because this will get lost in the shuffle if people don't stay on top of the fact that they're still going forward with the Nest bills. I will tell you this too. Only 3 of the 9 Nest bills are postponed. The 2 that I just mentioned, another one that has to do with taking off the restrictions on lot sizes for for building on. So it would actually just make the lots smaller so that you could build something on it. That was pushed off about 5 to 10 months. So pending a stormwater study. And then we have all of the rest of the bills, including a bunch of bills that are going to come up in April. And I'm going to list them out for you so you can kind of keep your eye on them. There's a building and codes update bill that's going to come up on April 2nd, potentially. It hasn't been taken off yet. This would include things like washer and dryer hookup stuff. And it's all these stuff that are supposed to update the code because it's antiquated. Well, one of the things that's apparently antiquated are that the bathrooms are divided by sex in the gas stations around here. They have women and men bathrooms, and they're going to rezone to get rid of that. So potentially, if this bill passes, every bathroom is going to be a unisex bathroom in Davidson County from now on. Another one coming up is the firewall building codes for the types of firewalls that are needed for 3 and 4 unit homes. Residential use in non-residential areas, so allowing residential units to be built in places that are, commercial, and single stair legislation. So when there are fire codes, the code has 2 stairways that usually go on the outsides of the building, and this would allow for 1 stairway in the center of the building. These are all interesting things. They're coming up in April. They all have to do with zoning. They will change how things are done in Nashville. So they're things to keep your eye on, even though technically it feels like we kind of fended off and pushed off some of these Nest bills. But we'll see what happens in a year when they do the same song and dance just a year later, and maybe a little bit more input from some of these departments. So that's our rundown on Nest. There Am I still here? There is a meeting tonight. It's at the Stanford it's at the Stanford High School. It's at 6 o'clock. Quinn Evans Siegel is going to be there if you want to join in. It is another Nest meeting. And besides that, pay attention to your council members. They're going to be sending out if they're doing more meetings. I know there are quite a few council members who are still frustrated with this legislation. So you will be seeing a few more meetings. I just don't know how effective they're going to be going forward. The last thing we're covering is transit. if we could keep connected to the internet. Transit, we got some new numbers out from transit. There's a power poll. Let's look at what we got here. The new power poll suggests that 93% want the mayor to make these improvements on transit. They're frustrated. They want some type of improvement with transit in Nashville. 69% say that they like O'Connell's modest proposal compared to Megan Barry's. So that's 69% of people kind of like feeling O'Connell's potential new plan. We haven't actually seen it yet, but they like what he's putting down. Okay. 57% think that his proposal will pass, which is interesting. But the most interesting thing about this poll is that only 7% said that they use public transit at least once a month. 27% said that they use it at least once a year. And I had to LOL at that because a lot of this transit plan has to do with these rapid bus transit routes, and it does have to do with buses. I know that we've heard a lot about sidewalks and those types of infrastructures and traffic lights, but the truth of the matter is this is to usher in this potential liability or potential boon to the city of bus transit, rapid bus transit, these special lanes, these schedules that have buses coming on a more regular basis. That's the point of this. So let's look at how Freddie O'Connell's unrolling his initiative and how he's trying to build up the support that he needs to actually get this referendum passed in November. For one, he's got a lot of support that he has built through the years because he's always been a transit guy. And don't make any mistakes. This was always the goal. He's the transit dude. There are so many interviews of him saying like, I was really excited when Megan Barry was in because she was pro-transit and I'm the pro-transit guy. And he wants there to be dedicated funding towards transit. He is a transit guy. So regardless of everything, that is what this is about. It's not just about, updating and filling the potholes and doing the sidewalks. This is about changing the makeup of how Nashville moves. And he's not hiding that, but sometimes the rhetoric around it kind of is softened because people are averse to some of this public transit stuff because they really just don't understand. They look around and they don't see how it's useful or used in Nashville. And there's so many reasons we've talked about as to why that is, and we won't get into that in this episode. But looking at how he's rolling this out, he's doing a lot of the same things that kind of occurred during his campaign and how he won mayor. For one, he has that base of his transit peeps that love him and they love transit and they want to change how people navigate Nashville. Those are his base. That's his coalition. He also has been pursuing the business sector. We saw him taking meetings last week with all these business people. He's trying to get people to buy in. How could they use this to their advantage? How would it help them? And how would it help the business, the stakeholders in Nashville? So he's been talking to those people. He's also not reinventing the wheel here. He's using a lot of the same people that Megan Barry used during her transit initiative. And the truth is that though he's separated himself, he does not want to be affiliated at all with Megan Barry's transit initiative because people were not happy with it, did not vote it through, did not like the light rail. So he's kind of stepped away and compromised and kind of switched directions. Like, we're not going to do light rail. We're not going to push anything too crazy here. I'm just going to toe the line to, take what was good from the initiative of that we wanted to dedicate funding towards transit, but not replicate what Megan Barry did. But he has hired people. The Nashville Business Journal did a great report on how O'Connell has the same firm from Barry. It's the HDR Inc., and they're designing his transit plan and in the operational and financial framework as one of the consulting partners. So he's using what has like his metro entrenched metro people who understand metro government. This looks exactly like how he won his mayoralship, is that he had his coalition. He got the business people backing him, especially after Wilshire bowed out had to leave the race. And then he's going to use the apparatus of the establishment, the bureaucratic makings of Metro, and all of their knowledge to his advantage to move this forward. So we'll see what that looks like. Let's look a little bit at how he's also doing this this approach as far as like how he's using the ticking time bomb approach to how he's pushing that we need to do this right now, that we're going to miss this window. This is something that we also saw from Megan Barry. But this tactic, it's been tried, but here's how he's framing it. He's framing it as there's all this money that can be matched by the federal government for transit right now, and if we don't use it right now and we don't raise the funds, it's going to go away and we're never going to be able to do this again. From WPLN, they put out in articles that said the proposal wouldn't be funded solely through sales tax increase. They're saying a 0.5-cent sales tax increase or something. Guys, that's like kind of what's out there right now. Establishing a pool of local transit money through the sales tax would allow access to federal dollars that so far have been off limits without a local match. So they're saying, well, if you just invest a little bit more of your sales tax, in over the next 30 years, then we can match these grants and we can have this pool of money to create the transit. Well, I want to read you something that Ben Cunningham, he's the head of the Nashville Tea Party, what he responded to this with, because I think it would resonate with a lot of people who are looking at this down the road. Because if we build it, maybe they'll ride, but also you have to maintain it. So yeah, maybe this is a 30-year referendum for dedicated funding, but then after that, you have to upkeep everything. So it's like forever. You have to pay for this stuff. It doesn't stop just because we bought it. You have to upkeep the fleet. You have to upkeep the people who run it. You have to keep the infrastructure. Everything continues on after we create this whatever new transit network. So this is what Ben Cunningham said. Please allow us to respectfully offer a different perspective. The 0.5-cent sales tax hike is just a small down payment for a transit vision that will be many orders of magnitude larger than the plan, which will be presented to voters in November. The architect of the plan, Atlanta-based Amanda Vandegrift, is very clear that this money will be used to bring in billions more in federal grants, which will be used to fulfill a much broader vision. The problem is that the federal grants will allow Nashville to build huge projects, but the money will not be permanent funding. At some point, the federal funding will stop, and this gap can only be filled by local revenue, i.e., huge future property. Oh gosh. Sorry, guys. I pay for my internet, so I'm gonna have to make a phone call. But to wrap it up, I'm just basically outlining that in other states where they have adopted, I've talked to people in Scottsdale, Arizona, and they have light rail that Scottsdale actually rejected because they didn't want to have to pay for it, and places in Texas and stuff like that. The buy-in is a little bit of a misnomer, only that it's dedicated funding to kickstart this transit revolution, right? but it has to be maintained indefinitely, or you have to, or it has to, it'll die. Like it's one or the other. So to think that this isn't something, that this is just something that you pay off like a down payment and then you're done, is just not true for the transit. It's a vision, and whether or not people are ready for or want this type of vision is yet to be seen. But I did give you some of those numbers. It does sound like people are kind of inching their way. I will say 57% thinking that it'll pass doesn't sound that strong to me, because people can think it will pass, but that doesn't mean, I don't know what that really means. 69% of people wanting, liking this proposal over Megan Barry's is like, I'm surprised it's not 100% of people that like this over Megan Barry. So take those numbers from that power poll with a grain of salt, and continue, looking into the different things that are releasing about this transit referendum. We're supposed to see something by the end of this month, but I'm not certain if that's going to be out by the end of March or not. I will keep you posted on that type of stuff. But before I cut out again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be covering the committee meetings that happened this week, as far as some of the stuff that's going on at the Hill. I'm going to be covering a little bit about animal vaccination in the state, beef and chicken vaccines. And stay tuned. Join our free subscription list, pamphleteer.co. And as always, you guys, stay informed. Have a good one.